Yeah, so excited about this conversation that we actually started a couple 10 minutes before we started recording, but at some point we realized it's getting really useful and played the record, pushed the record. So we're talking about this idea from the book, Slowing Down to the Speed of Life, the idea of two types of thinking that they call analytical thinking on one side and free-flowing thinking on the other side. And that all of us operate in one way, in one type of thinking or another in all of our life. And just to give a 1 minute short introduction of what those are, the analytical thinking is when we try to purposefully and consciously try to solve a problem or plan our future. Is basically we use in our mind as a computer based on our memory and the stored data that we have to make something happen. And we'll talk. I think we'll talk about when it's useful, when it's not. And the free flowing thinking is when we are when our attention wanders freely from one object to another, and when thinking, as they said, happens through you. I really like that phrase, when thinking happens through you. So it's when we flow, basically. I think we'll need to talk a bit more about what that actually means, how that looks like in life. But this, in a nutshell, is what those two types of thinking are, and we are either in one or another. And it's very useful to recognize when we're in one or another, and when it's appropriate to what we're trying to do and when it's not, because they both have their uses. So I wanted to ask you, Genevieve, like, what do you think is the appropriate use of that of analytical mind because type of thinking? Because I think many people are familiar with this one much more, but not with the free flowing thinking. So where could it be useful?
Yeah, good question. I would say analytical mind is like when you're trying to travel somewhere and you'll need to plan how to do that. That's when the analytical mind comes on. Perhaps you're studying for an exam. That's when the analytical mind comes on. You're trying to learn a piece of music. That's when the analytical mind comes on. So all of those times are the times when you're going to use that and tap into that. And it does have a purpose. It definitely does. For those situations, you need to, it's really focusing on, okay, how am I going to get to this destination? Really, am I going to get a bus? Is it going to be quicker to get a train, or, what have you?
Yeah, and I think it's very familiar to the absolute majority of people, because this is how we often live our life. We kind of try to analyze or plan our life using this type of thinking. And like you said, it's really helpful when we need to plan our route or to learn something. But the problems start when we try to solve a situation and we don't know they say in the book, we don't know all the variables, right? But what it means is like we try to find a solution and we can't find a solution. And what happens then is that the mind keeps spinning, it's looping, we keep thinking about it, but nothing comes. And I think what was really fascinating for me is that if we don't know that there is another type of thinking, this free-flowing thinking, then the only way to find the solution, we think, is to just keep doing that. It's like a car, the wheels are spinning, it's not moving anywhere, but we don't know that we have another alternative, we have another option. So we just push on gas more and more. And I really like what they said in the book about the two conditions, I would say, that the two conditions to use the free-flowing mode or to be in a free-flowing mode, because they call it free-flowing thinking, but I think of it as a free-flowing being. It doesn't feel like we're thinking sometimes. And they give examples of a basketball player, who throws a perfect shot, or an athlete who's been in the flow. So it's not just thinking, but it's being. And they say that the first one is to know that it exists. Like, it's really important that we know that there are two types of thinking, or two types of being, not just one. And the second one, to value it. Right. So when our car is spinning, when we're trying to think of a solution to a situation, or in future, for example, and nothing comes, but we keep thinking and thinking and thinking, and we can't stop doing that. If we know that there is another one, another type of thinking, and if we value it, we know that it's really valuable and it can provide us the solution if we let it. I think then it becomes really much easier to stop pushing the gas so much, and kind of disconnect from that analytical thinking, and to let the free flowing take over.
What was coming up for me is like when you're free flowing, it happens also in your body. So your body just feels really easy and at peace, and that's a good way to know that you're in the right place, opposed to when you don't feel so comfortable. So it's also really helpful, because in the book they mention that when you know that you're feeling, when you suddenly start feeling a slight discomfort, or something makes you feel horrible, you know that you're not in the right type of thinking. You know that you've gone off piste, so to speak. So having that feeling coming in, then you know that, okay, I'm not in the right place here. Like, I need to move and go to, if that's A, I need to go to B.
I love, that's what I love about conversations with you, is that you catch something that I didn't even catch in the book. Like, I don't remember them talking about it, but it makes so much sense. Yeah, that when we are the discomfort, I think, as you said, the discomfort is a really good sign that we are doing something not right, right? That there's a sense of struggle. Like, if there's discomfort, we often take it as a sign to try harder. But what I think you're saying is that it alarms us to the fact that we're not doing something right. So yeah.
Maybe it's not discomfort, because obviously we know as coaches being in discomfort is key. That's where the gold is. That's where creation, where action is. But it's more like I would describe it as almost like a different type of discomfort. And I've definitely had it a few times. I've been like, oh, I'm being so unkind to myself right now. I need to step out of that.
Yeah. So I'm hearing it's not like it's not discomfort, and it's not even struggle, the sense that we're pushing against something, we're pushing against life, we're trying to swim upstream. But what you're saying is that when we're not being kind to ourselves, and this maybe also inform us that we are not in the right type of thinking, we're not going down the right path right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And we only have and I've been thinking about this recently. We are just this, right? We are just this body. So we need to feed ourselves with good food, good energy, right? Because if we don't, then we're really jeopardizing a lot of things. Good health, a life expectancy. So this is key. It's something that's so important to shift, and how that also affects all the rest of the day if we start feeding ourselves with that type of energy.
And I think what I really like about the free flowing mode is that it always kind of it leads us towards a good place, right? It moves in the right direction. So if we are not being kind to ourselves, and we recognize that it automatically takes us somewhere better, right? So we recognize that, and we can choose something different, but we don't have to keep doing that. And I think, as we were talking just before we started recording, it's such an amazing feature of the human system that we have this thought recognition, that we can recognize if we're lost in an unhelpful, negative, judging thought, And at some point, we kind of snap back out of it, and we realize like, oh, I've been judging myself, or I've been hard on myself, and we can choose something different. Because if we didn't have that, any negative thought would take us with it, and drag us for as long as it lasted until the next negative thought comes. That would be really, really hard. But we have this thought recognition, which allows us to be mindful, conscious of the fact that, oh, I'm judging myself right now. At some point, realize that, and then we can choose. Then we have the choice.
Yeah, and what's coming up for me is the book is just so incredible for someone who really is living in constant analytical thought. Really, does anyone out there that feels like their brain is just constantly talking to it, playing detective, hypotheticals? It's an incredibly draining process. So I would really advise reading the book to see that that is the way it is, and just to have that feeling of understanding is just so great, because reading the book really gives you that, doesn't it? It gives you that sense of like hope, really, and
Yeah.
that this is the way it is. And if you read that, if anyone reads that that's feeling like that, that's feeling so negative and so depressed and so down and just seeing everything as really just not pleasant, then that book could really open up their eyes to a different way of being. And that is super exciting. And, it's a bit like in The Secret Garden in the film, when you can't really believe something so beautiful exists, in the book or the film. And then he walks in and then you see this beautiful garden with all these different flowers, and it's just breathtaking. And that is what happens when you read something like that, because really makes you think, wow, like this is possible to change mindsets.
Yeah, I love how you describe that. It really gives a picture of possibility. And I think I love how you address this specifically to people who maybe not not just spending too much time trying to make their life work, or thinking about some future potential problems, but you actually, I heard, speaking to people who are feeling depressed, who are feeling down right now, and the book does give this hope in the form of another way of living that's not necessary, that doesn't need to be learned. I think that's what I love about this way of free flowing thinking, that we don't have to learn it. We actually had to learn the analytical thinking, which was taught to us in schools and then university and then work. I mean, but we actually had the free flowing all along as we were children. I mean, look at children, and anybody would see that to be true. Like, children just spend all of their time, most of their time, in free flowing mode, and that's, I think, what we love about children so much, that we recognize something that we had but forgot, not something that we hadn't lost. As I personally often thought, that like, well, it was cool to be in that, be a child and be just so playful and having fun and enjoying life. But then I lost it, and now I'm an adult who is so serious and analytical. But it's actually not lost. It's just obscured by another type of thinking that we engage in most of our time now. But it's always available, and I think that's the hope you're pointing to. My feeling is that it's always available. It's just behind that, the thoughts behind that analytical thinking. It's like the clouds and the sun, right? The sun is always available, but the clouds can obscure it. But the clouds can pass, and the sun is always there. So it does give hope. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. Really love what you're saying there. And it's also making me think, even if there isn't a sun in the sky, that doesn't need to be your day. That doesn't need to be how you see life, or there's no sun. But what could you also see? You're alive.
That's a fact. Yeah, yeah. That's a good place to start, I think, in any exploration. Yeah.
You have in your life, being grateful, showing gratitude.
Yeah. And I think for those people who are depressed, which I think, I mean, I personally can relate to, had those moments in my life. And like, I really like what you said, that it doesn't have to be like the sun doesn't have to come out all the time. Even recognizing the clouds can be powerful, because I think when we accept feeling down, when we accept feeling low, when we accept that the sun today, the sun is not there. It's just clouds, and it feels really dark, and it feels really gloomy. But something shifts the moment we accept that and we make peace with that. And I think at that moment, a ray of sun, like to continue in this metaphor, breaks through the clouds and reminds us that the sun has been and will be there all the time. But it doesn't happen through trying to make sun come out, but it happens through accepting the clouds and accepting that, well, yeah, I'm feeling down right now, and that's okay. Like, I can accept that. Like you said, I can accept because I'm alive, at least. Yeah.
How do you think you tap into your free-flowing mind?
So I'll give you an example of what happens during meditation. For example, when I meditate, and at some point, so I'm thinking about something, and I'm it feels like a thought is taking me with it. And if I allow myself to be taken, at some point I just realize, like, it feels like I'm breaking through the clouds again, metaphorically, like a plane breaks through the clouds, right? So at that moment, it doesn't feel like I'm doing something, but what I'm actually doing is that I'm allowing thoughts to take me whatever they want to take me. I'm allowing, not in thoughts, the flow of life or the flow of attention to, I'm allowing my attention to be taken, rather than trying to make something. Because I think in the book they emphasize this fact that we can't make ourselves into free flowing mode. Right? It's not something, because I think it's so can be so easily misunderstood. It's not something we need to will into existence, right? But it happens by itself the moment we start to trying to make it happen. And again, I think here is really no technique. There is really no way to make it happen, but there are metaphors that can be useful. And one metaphor they use in the book is the silt. Remember the mud in the cup. Like, if the water in the cup is muddy, all we need to do is to wait until the mud settles, because it will settle by itself. This is just the nature of, how gravity works, that it will be at the bottom of the cup, and the water will be relatively clean. I think that's the same thing happens with our mind. Like, if we allow ourselves to be just to wander, to be taken by thoughts, at some point we will be in flow. But it's not an effortful action. At least that's how it feels for me. What about you?
Yeah, it's not I like that. It's not an effortful action. Yeah, that's exactly right. I think what's coming up for me is when you're away from thought, when you realize that you've been in thought, and then that's when you start the free-flowing mind. And it's about slowing down is coming up for me as well, like really slowing down, not feeling like you're in a hurry for anything. So it's just letting it come out of you, what wants to come out of you. Obviously, as we spoke about before with John Cleese, it reminds me of that. It's creativity is a lot about the free-flowing mind.
I would maybe push it a bit further, or a lot further, and say creativity is all about the free-flowing mind, right? Because like they say in the book, that in an analytical mind, we cannot, essentially, we can't create anything new, because all we have is the memory. All we have is what we know, and creativity is about rearranging, or it could be about rearranging what we already know in a new, unfamiliar way. But I think most often we assume, like we imagine creativity as creating something new, like it's something unexpected, something that wasn't there before. And it's another use of the free flowing mind, or another benefit of it is that we can get insights. That's how we get insights, right? Insight is something that was not seen before. And how does it happen? It happens by itself. Like an insight just comes. We don't will insight into existence, but we are open for it to come. So I think creativity, it's so, yeah, it's like you said, it's so important that we see the connection between the free flowing mind and the creativity.
Yeah, I love that. It just also makes me think that that's why what's coming up for me after we do something creative, that's why we have like a buzz or a hit in our mind, because we're in that free flowing state for the whole time we're doing it. So that's
Yeah.
why it sets us up so beautifully, because I know that whenever I create music or write some lyrics or whatever it is, when I'm in that space after I come out of it, it's like a dopamine, can't say that word, dopamine hit of like, wow,
Yeah.
awakens the brain.
It feels good, right?
Exactly, it feels good.
Yeah.
And it also sparks off other creativity, or you suddenly have an idea about something else.
Yeah. And I think what's really, on one hand, it's beautiful. On the other hand, it may be, I recognize, quite challenging or even disturbing to some people, to recognize that there is no control there. And I think that what maybe scares us from being in that mode more often, or spending more time there, because we're being lived by life. Creativity is happening through us, but we're not controlling it. And we're so used to this notion of control, and because of the analytical type of thinking, and because of the culture that's conditioned us, that it may feel scary to let go of control, and to not know where are we going. And creativity, I think, is all about that. Like, we don't know actually what's gonna occur to us. We don't know what we're gonna create. But like you said, it feels good in the moment of creating. It feels good.
I would say actually it feels good after you've finished.
Yeah, because maybe when you're in the process, you don't even think about how it feels. You're just in the process. But it does feed energy back, so it feels good. I think it also may be a good sign that the nature, or God, or whatever term we use, wants us to actually be more often in that type of being, right? Because it feels good. It's a good sign that it's good for us. Whereas I think everybody could relate to how it feels to be too much in our head, right? Like, to be thinking about something so hard, and then it just kind of, it doesn't feel good. Like, it doesn't produce a result, and it feels like we're overheating in our mind. And that's a contrast that doesn't feel good. So maybe that is not very helpful, and we should spend less time there.
But it's also very, what's the word I'm looking for? It's nothing new, it's what people are used to, so they gravitate towards that.
And I think that brings us back to the beginning, when we talked about that, unless we know that another way of thinking exists, we have no alternative. So all we have is like basically the alternative of being too much in our head, or a bit less in our head, or the least in our head, but still all still an analytical type of thinking. So unless we have an alternative, we kind of, we try to spin our wheels slower or faster, but we still have to spin our wheels.
I guess it's just seeing how, really understanding how much more beneficial it is to be there than stay in the analytical mind. And until you actually feel like that, you're going to keep going back to the other way. It's, I'm trying to think of an analogy, but it's just, even if something feels good, it's a bit like coaching, right? Someone can want to have coaching, but they can think it's a load of, like, oh, you just tell me what to do and I just do it. And but then they actually realize that it's work and it's not just a holiday camp, you're not just turning up on a call and you have work to do. Like, you need to come with something that you want to talk about. You need to show up committed. You need to read all the agreements. It's not a walk in the park. What we've chosen to do is not for the faint-hearted, and it's not for the faint-hearted to be a client either. So I guess it's realizing that you love that much that you will do anything to keep to the commitment, whatever your coach gives you, whatever. It's the same thing. If you really start to realize how much that changes your life, then you're going to want to go there more. So basically, yes, it's like, if you know that a coach is helping you change your life and you're seeing results of that, you're seeing value in their work, then you're going to want to work with them. But if they're not giving you value, then you're not going to want to work with them. It doesn't matter how much money it is. It's got nothing to do with the money. It's to do with the value. It's exactly the same thing. Like,
Yeah, so it's,
realize how much it's giving you. Like, you are going to go in that way. You're not going to stay in the analytical. But if you don't see that, then
yeah, so there's an element of yeah, it's not just about feeling good, but it's about actually it producing results. It's about trust and experimentation with it. That it's not the mode of thinking just to go to feel good, but it actually feeds you new ideas and solutions and creative insights that are really, as they say in the book, that are very relevant and appropriate to the present moment, to the present challenges that we're facing. So there's not just lofty ideas, but there's actually useful tools to move forward in our life, whatever the situation we're facing. So it's not just about feeling good and basking in that feeling good and just like going there to do that, but it's highly useful and very practical mode of thinking, just as much as, or maybe more so, as the analytical one. But I think we often think of analytical one as the practical, like that. This is because we're conditioned, we're taught this way, that if we have a situation, we need to think the solution, like we need to wield the solution. But actually, what we're pointing out to, and what the book talks about, is like, if we let ourselves not know the solution will come, and it will often be much better quality than the one we could think about. And I think everybody has these kind of examples from their own life. When you have a problem, when you have a situation, then you think about it and you can't find the solution. And then an idea just comes out of the blue, and it's like, wow, and that's the perfect idea of what to do.
It reminds me of that part in the book with a woman and her husband, and she's constantly thinking negatively about him.
Yeah.
That part in the book.
Yeah.
And then suddenly she has this realization that she doesn't need to do that.
Yeah.
It's just a bold moment. It's amazing. And then it just completely changes her life.
Well, yeah, that what happened there, right? That what first a thought recognition happened. That she recognized going down this path of unhelpful thinking. Like, without that, she would not be able to do, without thought recognition, that which we luckily have, she would not be able to do it. So she could be just keep thinking negatively about her husband forever, or until they break up. But she realized that, and second, what happened is, once she realized that, an insight came, right? That she realized, like, oh, that's what I'm doing. Like, oh, this is not helpful. And then this insight came from the free flowing mode, right? From something opened up for her to see. the situation in a different light.
Which is incredible, right? It's absolutely incredible that
It
just
is.
that one mode of thinking, free flowing, can completely alter your world. And you can feel better inside as well. You can feel good.
Yeah, it almost sounds like the secret garden you mentioned, right? It almost sounds like too good to be true, that we can feel good and get new ideas and creative solutions. Like, how good is that?
It's making me laugh because for such a long time I felt like, oh no, that's not, that's not possible. That's the other one's possible. There
Mm.
I find the answers in the analytical mind. There's my truth.
Right. And I think it's also necessary. I mean, we need to wonder, like the prodigal son, story from the Bible. We need to wonder to find our way back home. And unless we're really, lost and confused in the misusing the analytical mind, because like we said, it has its proper uses of misusing the analytical mind, of trying to manage our life, of trying to predict the future, of trying to, control our experience. Like, unless we've done that, we can't really appreciate the free flowing mode so much. So it's also
Yeah,
necessary.
I would say exactly like you said, it's more like the misuse. Let me rephrase it. It was the misuse of the analytical mind for me, which is not helpful.
Yeah. And I had those examples, and I coached people who had those examples. And one example I remember from a woman. She had the question of whether or not to have a baby, and she had been thinking about it for weeks, because she was choosing between her career and the baby, and like she couldn't come to a solution. And I think it's a good example of a misuse of analytical mind. They say in the book, when not all variables are known, it's not helpful. So in this situation, it wasn't the solution of whether to take a car or a taxi, or a train to an airport. You need to calculate the distance to compare different options. But it was like she didn't know. Like, it's not a situation where you can just know. And she was trying and trying and trying, and nothing came. And what we explored was like that there is another way. Like, there is another mode of thinking. And once that became clear, um, she knew what to do. At some point, she just knew what to do. And it didn't come during the coaching session. It came later. And it didn't come, I'm sure, it didn't come from her thinking about it more, but it came from her opening up to not knowing. And that's where she knew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's an incredible example, isn't it? Something very, big. Do you want a baby? Do you
Yeah.
want a career?
Yeah.
So it's very exciting that she stepped out of the analytical and went into the free flowing and found her answer.
And I'm sure that required courage on her part as well, because I mean, it can be really scary not to know. Like,
Absolutely.
it feels so pressing. It feels so important, and the time is ticking. And she felt like she need to know. So it required the courage to not know. But once she accepted that she didn't know, which was the truth. She didn't know. Once she accepted that, like the knowing what to do could finally find her. Yeah. I think that speaks to that maybe one of the major differences between the analytical and the free flowing mode is that the free flowing is all about control. It's all about uh, of trying to manage, to control, to predict, to analyze. It's all about conscious effort. But free flowing mode is about the lack of control. It's about being open. It's about not knowing. It's about being lived by life, being moved by life, being fed new ideas and solutions. So it's a really distinct difference in terms of control. Like, and they say in the book that the gateway into free flowing mode is not knowing, right? Which is also about a lack of control. Like, when we accept that we don't know, we don't always know, and we don't always know what's best for us. I think that's when we can access the free-flowing mode. And that's where, whether we want to call it the higher intelligence, God, life, the universe, whatever term we're comfortable with, that's when that power could take over and feed us the new ideas and solutions.
And and what's coming up for me is how much more exciting that is when something isn't predictable, because you don't know the answer, right? You're just living a journey, and whatever will be, and how much better is that just to sort of let that unfold and trust the universe that whatever's meant to be will be, instead of trying to figure out an answer to everything. Will this date work out? Will this be the right person? Will I get the house I want? Will I get the money I want in my bank account? Like, that's just adding pressure and creating intensity.
Yeah, I think what you just said, I think, speaks volumes about the inner work you have done, because the fact that you can see it as exciting, I think, speaks a lot about you. Because I think many times I wouldn't term it as exciting. Many times I would term it as scary. But it is exciting. It is exciting when we have a certain, I think, degree of trust in the universe and God, in whatever we want to call it. Then it becomes exciting. Then it becomes a movie we're watching that we don't know what's going to happen next in the next episode. But if we don't have that trust, it becomes scary, because it feels like we need to manage our life. And unless we manage it, it really may, something bad may happen. And I think it's an experience that many people can relate to, like that feeling that unless they manage their life, with an example of that lady, unless she knew whether or not to have a child, like, there was no way she would know. Like, unless she controlled it, unless she managed it, nothing good would come. And what you're saying is, like, good will come if we trust. And what needs to happen will happen, and we can trust that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, she was a perfect example of that. Like, she lived in the unknown. She stepped into free-flowing mode where there is excitement and there is what's going to happen. It's unpredictable. And that's exciting. Whereas if you knew everything that was going to happen to you, wouldn't that be quite boring?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we all, when we're children, we lived more in that state of excitement, because we had less expectations and also less fear of life. We wouldn't term it as trust, but we're just, because we're most of the time naturally in the free-flowing mode, we're just kind of playing and not knowing what's going to happen and being okay with that. But when the more time we spent in analytical mode, the more we kind of took it as a default belief that we need to know, and life is not to be trusted, and life is dangerous. And I mean, so much of our culture speaks to that. But what you're saying is, like, we can get back to the excitement. We can get back to feeling of enjoyment and not knowing what's next, like to see it as an adventure. And I think it really it paints a picture of possibility for people, that in any moment they have the free-flowing mode available. It's not like anybody who's listening to this conversation, I think, should know that it's not possible that they lost it. It's not something that you can lose. It's something that you are, which means that you can't lose it. It can be obscured by the misuse or habitual use of the analytical mode, but it's not something to be lost. So we all have it, and we can get back to it at any moment.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's not lost. It's within. It's within us, 100%. Everything's within us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe just as an exercise that I would invite people, or suggest people do, is that can be really helpful in seeing the beauty and of the free flowing of how the free-flowing mode operates already in their life is to sit down and to write all the major events in their life from the time they're 15 years old to up until the present moment, no matter how old they are. And write down all the major points, like how did you choose your major to study in the university? How did you find your first job? How did you meet your the significant people in your life? Some books, some movies that really influence you, that stand out. And when they write this down, this list, it's not going to take more than half hour. When they write those down, I would invite them to ask themselves, how did those major things happen? Had they planned them? Had they controlled them? Had they had to manage them, or were they happening spontaneously, like as if life was leading them in those crucial moments?
Mm.
And when that happens, when you do this exercise, you realize that actually all the major events in my life happened not because I controlled them, and not I could not control them actually, but they happened spontaneously, and life was leading me following a certain flow pattern. So life, it teaches, I think, us that life can be trusted, that there is intelligence to life, that there is beauty to life, that we can be in the free flowing mode more often. I think that gives this sense of trust. Like, yeah, I can let go of control.
Mm.
Yeah.
I love that. Really love that exercise. And also I can imagine that when you go back and look at those life moments, it's going to be like, wow, I was actually in free flowing mode.
Yeah.
When you might just automatically come to this exercise and think, well, I bet you I was always in analytical mode. So it's a great exercise, and I think anyone that does that is going to experience a shift for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. A shift, and really, I think, like you're right, we forget about that we were in free flowing mode because we first, it feels so easy, so effortless, and second, we don't usually, we don't often look back at our life in this way of looking at for those major turning points. So we kind of forget how they happened. But those were serendipities. Those were lucky coincidences. Those are those things that could not be predicted or controlled.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful.
So I'm aware of the time, and we I know we could talk for hours, and it would be really really useful. But I think it's a good maybe place to wrap up, and to maybe encourage people to read those. Maybe not the whole book, if they're not so inclined, but the first and the second chapters of the book, which we will write down the name of the book in the description wherever you're watching this, because it's really helpful as an introduction or reintroduction to the free flowing mode, because we're, like we said, it was never lost, but we could forget about it. So
yeah, no, yeah, I deeply recommend the book for anyone, because I've been there where you live in that mode of constant thinking and it's exhausting. So I'd invite anyone that's feeling like they just can't step out of it, or they feel very low mood, or they're feeling very sad, please read the book, and it will give you more hope.
and maybe also reach out, if you in that place, I would invite the person who's watching to reach out to Genevieve, because I feel like you really get those people who are in that dark place, and you could be that ray of sunlight, that glimmer of hope, that you could really help them to shift their thinking, to change that situation. So don't hesitate to reach out to any of us actually, and to we could have a conversation.
Absolutely. Send me a DM.
Yeah. So any closing thoughts, anything you would want to say before we wrap up?
Thoughts, Yakov. I think I've spoken out.
And that's a good feeling too, right? To feel complete.
I feel
Yeah.
complete. I would just say, yeah, just yeah. It's. I just want people to feel like hope and feel like, you know, it doesn't life doesn't have to be like this. You don't have to wake up in the morning and feel like my life doesn't have any purpose, there's no possibilities. There 100% is for you. It's just about opening the door slightly to a different way of being.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And so I will stop the recording.